Hello, this is Stabilizing the Economy, Section A, Stabilization of the Economy lecture. Our prioritized standard, Economic Standard 47. Objectively, we're going to distinguish between expansionary and restrictive policies meant to influence the economy. Now, both unemployment and inflation can be harmful to the economy if left unchecked and allowed to remain at too high of a level. Especially in the short run, the money supply has the ability to lower either unemployment or inflation. When the money supply is higher, unemployment is generally lower. So let's demonstrate that. So if we have a higher money supply, when we talk about aggregate demand, that's spending. So aggregate demand and money supply are basically the same thing. They mean the exact same thing. So if aggregate demand is increasing, therefore you have more money supply. That's going to show us a few things when we use our X marks the spot. So again, at this point, you're going to notice that unemployment is going to be lower because total production levels have increased. And when total production levels increase, that means you're going to have more people with jobs to actually produce those products. And when the money supply is lower, inflation is generally lower. Since this encourages decreased overall spending, results in lower price levels. So if we're going to demonstrate that. So again, aggregate demand, money supply mean the same thing. So if you have a lower money supply, it means it has shifted to the left. Let me try that again. Shifted to the left. Going to try it one more time. Shifted to the left. Shifted to the left. Fourth time's a charm. So X marks the spot. So this basically shows us at this point, hey, look at that, lower prices for products now. Yay. Unfortunately, while one problem plaguing the economy can be improved with the money supply, it at the same time makes the other problem worse. So when the money supply is higher, so a high money supply, inflation is generally higher. So again, at this point, yay, we have more jobs. Wow, people have jobs. Take that in unemployment monster. At the same time, it's going to result in higher prices, and therefore more inflation. Because guess who's back? Back again. Inflation's back. Tell a friend. So while people do have more jobs, it's going to cost them a lot more money now to actually purchase those items because of this. And when the money supply is lower, so if money supply is lower, that means our aggregate demand is going to shift to the left. Unemployment is generally higher. So while at this point, X marks the spot, we are going to notice less inflation. Take that, inflation monster. But at the same time, because prices go down, because there's less money out there, it also means they're going to be spending less. So therefore, you're probably going to notice a decline in some jobs. When it comes to correcting the economy, the federal government really only has two options. Either they can increase the money supply or they can decrease the money supply. Now, if the economy is growing too slowly and therefore suffering from high unemployment, the government can correct this problem by adopting an expansionary policy. On occasion, this is sometimes called an easy money policy, meaning it's just a lot easier to find money. So with an expansionary policy, this stimulates the economy by increasing the money supply, which leads to greater overall spending. So based on that overall spending, with more spending, more jobs will be created, causing unemployment to lower. But guess who's back? Back again. That's right, inflation's back. Tell a friend. Now, if the economy is growing too rapidly, and sometimes it is growing too rapidly, and therefore suffering from high inflation, the government can also correct this problem by adopting a restrictive policy, which on occasion has been called tight money policy because it's harder to get a hold of money. Now, if you do a restrictive policy, this slows the economy by decreasing the money supply, which leads to reduced overall spending. So, economy's going too fast, we're going to slow that sucker down. So, with less spending, overall price levels will decline, causing inflation to lower. But as you know, guess who's back? Back again. That's right, unemployment's back. Tell a friend. So the government must be careful when using either of these policies, as using too aggressive of a policy will make the other problem worse. So a good balance must be struck. The federal government can actually stabilize an economy that is either growing too rapidly, meaning suffering from high inflation, or growing too slowly, meaning suffering from high unemployment, using either fiscal policy, I said fiscal policy, not physical, or monetary policy. Now, with fiscal policy, this involves the use of national government spending and taxation programs to affect the level of economic activity in such a way to promote price stability, maximum employment, and reasonable economic growth. So, with fiscal policy, the President and Congress actually conducts fiscal policy, at least at the federal level. So whenever we talk about fiscal policy, we're talking about the President and Congress working together. Now, local and state governments, they can actually use fiscal policy also, yet their tools are going to be slightly different than the ones we're talking about here. But again, in this, we're going to be focusing on the federal fiscal policy. Now, fiscal policy influences aggregate demand by trying to impact things like consumption, meaning how much people spend, investment, government spending itself, and also net exports, possibly doing things to affect the products we get from other countries or the products that we produce for other countries. Now, monetary policy, this refers to actions by the Federal Reserve System that lead to changes in the supply of money and also the availability of credit. Now, I should point out, monetary policy is done at the federal level. It is not done at the state or local levels. This is only something done at the federal level. Now, rather than directly dealing with consumers, monetary policy is actually more concerned with the banking industry. So they will do things that will influence the banking industry to basically affect consumers indirectly. Now, monetary policy influences aggregate demand by impacting the stock of money, which we'll talk about that in just one moment, and also the velocity of circulation. What do we mean by those two terms? The stock of money, this is basically the total amount of money that's in the economy. So when we talk about like M1, that's what we're talking about, the stock of money, just the money that happens to be out there in the economy that people have. And the velocity of circulation, this means the number of times that the average dollar is spent on final goods and services. So if you have like a $10 bill you spend at Walmart, that $10 bill probably doesn't go straight to the bank. It probably will go to another consumer that's getting change, and then they're going to spend that money somewhere else, and then at that business they're going to have that money now, and then it gets exchanged with someone else. So the same $1 is probably going to change hands multiple times. That's what's meant by velocity of circulation. Now, fiscal policy uses 5 tools to stabilize the economy. While monetary policy uses just 3 tools to stabilize the economy. So fiscal policy tools include marginal tax rates, tax incentives, changes in government spending, public transfer payments, and progressive income taxes. We'll talk in depth about how those work later. And monetary policy tools, these include reserve requirements, discount rates, and open market operations. That might sound slightly familiar because we talked about these a couple of units ago. All right, this concludes Stabilizing the Economy, Section A, Stabilization of the Economy lecture. Our prioritized standard was Economic Standard 47, and objectively now you can distinguish between expansionary and restrictive policies meant to influence the economy.